40 below zero. That's how cold it was at the Chosin Reservoir in November 1950. Cold enough that your rifle froze. Cold enough that morphine froze in the syrettes so the medics couldn't give it to the wounded. Cold enough that men's fingers froze to their weapons. Cold enough that you'd find Marines dead in their foxholes, frozen solid in firing positions, rifles still pointed at the Chinese who'd killed them. The cold killed more men than bullets did. Frostbite, hypothermia, simple exposure. You'd see boys with blackened fingers and toes, dead tissue that would have to be amputated if they survived long enough to reach a field hospital. You'd watch men lose the ability to speak because their faces were frozen. Watch them stop shivering, which meant they were dying, which meant they had maybe an hour before their bodies just shut down. And all the while, the Chinese kept coming. Wave after wave of them, blowing bugles, screaming, attacking through the darkness and the snow. Human wave attacks against dug-in Marines who could barely pull their triggers because their hands were frozen, who had to piss on their rifle bolts to unfreeze them, who fought and died in the coldest hell on earth. I lost 3 toes and 4 fingers at Chosin. They're buried somewhere in North Korea, cut away by the blackness of frostbite. I'm missing pieces of my ears. My face is scarred from the cold burns that went deep enough to damage nerves. When it gets below freezing now, my stumps ache. Phantom pain from fingers that don't exist anymore, from toes I left behind in frozen Korean mud. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is I can still feel that rifle. Can still feel the frozen metal stuck to my hands. Can still remember the moment I realized my skin was frozen to the weapon, that pulling away would tear the flesh right off. Can still feel the choice I had to make. Keep holding the rifle and keep shooting, or let go and lose the ability to defend myself, but maybe save my fingers. I chose the rifle, kept shooting, lost the fingers anyway. My name is Frank Ramos, and I was a private first class with the 1st Marine Division at the Chosin Reservoir. I'm 73 years old now, missing pieces of myself that froze off in Korea over 50 years ago. People see my scars, my missing fingers, and they think they understand. They don't. They can't. Because the scars on the outside are nothing compared to what the cold did to us on the inside. I grew up in New Mexico, Albuquerque, hot, dry desert. I'd never seen snow before the Marine Corps sent me to Korea. Never experienced real cold. The coldest I'd ever been was maybe 40 degrees on a winter night. I had no concept of what minus 40 felt like, how it could kill you, how it could take pieces of you and never give them back. I enlisted in 1949 when I was 18, wanted adventure, wanted to prove myself, wanted to be a Marine because Marines were the toughest, the best, the few and the proud. They sent me to boot camp at Paris Island, taught me to shoot, to fight, to follow orders, taught me a lot of things, but they didn't teach me how to survive the kind of cold that turns human beings into frozen statues. Korea started in June 1950. We landed at Incheon in September, pushed north toward the Chinese border. By November, we'd reached the Chosin Reservoir, spread out in the mountains of North Korea. The brass said the war was almost over, said we'd be home by Christmas, said the Chinese wouldn't intervene. They were wrong about everything. The Chinese hit us on November 27th, 1950. Hundreds of thousands of them pouring across the border, surrounding our positions. We'd been told there were no Chinese troops in Korea. Turns out there were about 120,000 of them in the mountains around the Chosin Reservoir, waiting for us. And it was already cold. 20 below, 30 below, getting colder every day. We had summer uniforms, light sleeping bags, no cold weather gear. The supply lines hadn't caught up with our advance. We were freezing even before the fighting started. I was with Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. We were holding a position on a hill overlooking the main supply route, the only road south out of the trap we were in. Our job was to keep that road open so the division could withdraw. Simple mission. Impossible conditions. The Chinese attacked at night, came out of the darkness blowing bugles, screaming, firing. We couldn't see them until they were almost on top of us. No moon, just darkness and snow and the muzzle flashes of their weapons. I was in a foxhole with Martinez, a kid from Texas. We'd dug in as best we could, but the ground was frozen solid. Couldn't dig more than a foot down. So we piled rocks, made low walls, tried to create some protection. It wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. The first wave hit our line at 0200 hours. Martinez saw them first. Contact! Contact front. I shouldered my M1, started firing. Could barely see what I was shooting at. Just shadows moving in the dark. Muzzle flashes. The sound of bugles and screaming and rifle fire. Martinez was firing beside me. The whole line was firing. Machine guns, rifles, grenades, everything we had. But they kept coming. For every Chinese soldier we shot, 5 more appeared. Human wave attacks. They didn't care about casualties. Just kept pushing forward, climbing over their own dead, overwhelming positions by sheer numbers. My rifle jammed. The bolt froze. I'd been shooting so much the barrel was hot, but the mechanism was exposed to the cold and it had seized up. I couldn't chamber a new round. The rifle was useless. Martinez handed me his. Use mine. I'll fix yours. I took his M1, kept firing while he worked on mine. He pulled out his lighter, tried to heat the bolt to get it moving again. In that cold, the lighter barely worked. The flame was tiny, weak. But he got the bolt unstuck, chambered around, handed my rifle back. Thanks, man. Don't mention it. We both kept firing. Our fingers were already going numb. I could barely feel the trigger. Had to look down to make sure my finger was in the right place. Had to force my hand to squeeze because the muscles weren't responding right. The Chinese broke through our line about 50 yards to the left. We could hear the fighting, screaming, grenades, the wet sound of bayonets, hand-to-hand combat in the darkness and the cold. Men killing each other in the most primitive way while we froze to death around them. By dawn on the 28th, we'd held them off, barely. The hillside in front of our position was covered with Chinese bodies, hundreds of them. They'd just kept attacking, kept dying, kept coming. But the cold was worse than the Chinese. Martinez was shivering uncontrollably. So was I. We'd been outside in 20 below weather for 8 hours, fighting, unable to warm ourselves. Our uniforms were inadequate. We had no winter gear, nothing to protect us from the kind of cold that kills. I can't feel my feet, Martinez said through chattering teeth. Me neither. Keep moving. Keep the blood flowing. But you couldn't move much. Had to stay in position. Had to be ready for the next attack. So we just sat there, freezing, waiting. The sun came up, didn't help, still 20 below. Colder, maybe. The wind was brutal, cutting through our uniforms like they weren't there. Wind chill had to be 40, 50 below. I looked at my hands. They were white, not just pale. White, the color of death. I couldn't make a fist, could barely move my fingers. I tried to warm them under my arms, but there was no warmth anywhere on my body. Everything was cold, everything was freezing. We need to get warm, Martinez said. We need fire, but we couldn't make a fire. Fire would draw Chinese attention. Fire would get us killed. So we just froze. By midday, men were collapsing. Not from wounds, from cold. I saw a Marine just fall over, unconscious. His buddy tried to wake him up, couldn't. The corpsman came over, checked him. Hypothermia, severe. They dragged him to the aid station, but I don't think he made it. His body had just given up, shut down from the cold. My rifle was frozen to my hands. I'd been holding it so long, gripping the metal in the cold, that the skin had frozen to it. I tried to let go and felt the skin pulling. Realized if I released my grip, I'd tear the skin right off my palms. I kept holding it. What else could I do? I needed the rifle. The Chinese would attack again. If I couldn't shoot, I'd die. So I held on, feeling my hands freezing to the metal, knowing I was damaging them, knowing I'd probably lose fingers, but not knowing how bad it would be. Martinez was in worse shape. His feet were black, not white like frostbite, black like gangrene, like the tissue was already dead. He couldn't walk, could barely stand, but he stayed in position, kept his rifle ready, because what else was there to do? "I think I'm dying, Frank," he said that afternoon. "You're not dying. We're going to make it." My feet are black. That's not good, is it? It wasn't good. It meant the tissue was dead. Meant he'd lose them if we got him to a hospital. Meant he'd probably die if we didn't. "We'll get you out. Just hold on." But I didn't know if we'd get anyone out. We were surrounded. The Chinese were everywhere. The road south was contested. We were trapped in the coldest place on earth with an enemy that outnumbered us 10 to 1. The attacks kept coming, night after night, wave after wave. The Chinese would hit us at midnight, at 0200, at 0400. Whenever they thought we were weak, exhausted, frozen enough that we couldn't fight back. But we fought back, even with frozen rifles, even with blackened fingers and toes, even with bodies that were shutting down from hypothermia. We fought because the alternative was dying. I learned to piss on my rifle bolt to unfreeze it. Learned that urine was warm enough to melt the ice that formed in the mechanism. Disgusting, humiliating, but necessary. Half the Marines on that hill were doing it. Had to. Our rifles kept freezing, and piss was the only warm liquid we had. The wounded were dying from the cold faster than from their injuries. A Marine would get shot, go into shock, and before the medics could treat him, he'd freeze to death. The morphine syrettes were frozen solid. The medics kept them in their mouths trying to thaw them, but it didn't always work. Men died in agony because we couldn't give them pain relief. Martinez died on December 1st, not from his feet, from exposure. He'd lost so much body heat over 4 days that his core temperature dropped too low. He just stopped shivering, stopped responding, stopped being conscious. I held him while he died, trying to keep him warm with my own body, but I had no warmth to give. I was dying too. We all were. His last words were about his mother. Wanted me to tell her he loved her. Wanted me to say he'd been brave. Wanted me to lie and say he hadn't suffered. I promised I would. Another lie to add to all the others. They wrapped Martinez in a poncho and laid him with the other dead. By then we had over 100 bodies, frozen solid, stacked like cordwood behind our position. We'd carry them out when we broke through. Couldn't leave them behind. Marines don't abandon their dead. My hands were ruined by then. The skin had torn away when I finally pulled them off my rifle. Raw flesh, bleeding, instantly freezing. The corpsman wrapped them, but there was nothing he could do. The damage was done. My fingers were blackened, clearly frostbitten, probably going to be amputated. But I could still hold a rifle, could still pull a trigger, could still fight. So I did. On December 6th, we got the order to move out, break through the Chinese lines, fight south to the coast, evacuate by sea. The whole division was withdrawing, fighting its way out of the trap. 13 days of continuous combat in 40 below cold. 13 days of freezing and dying and fighting just to escape. We carried our dead. Martinez and hundreds of others carried them on trucks, on sleds, on our backs, refused to leave them behind. Marines take care of their own, even in death. I made it to Hungnam on December 11th, the port, where the Navy was waiting to evacuate us. I walked onto that ship and finally felt warm air. The heat from the ship's boilers, real warmth. For the first time in 2 weeks, I passed out, just collapsed. My body couldn't handle the warmth after surviving the cold for so long. When I woke up, I was in the ship's medical bay. Doctors were examining my hands, my feet, my face. "We're going to have to take some fingers," one of them said. "The tissue is dead. If we don't amputate, gangrene will set in." I nodded. Didn't care. I was alive. I was warm. They could take whatever they needed. They took 4 fingers and 3 toes, cut away the blackened tissue, the dead meat that used to be part of me. Part of me is still in North Korea. Frozen pieces of Frank Ramos left behind in the Chosin Reservoir. The physical wounds healed. Sort of. The stumps scarred over. The frostbite burns on my face faded to white patches. I learned to function with 6 fingers instead of 10. Learned to walk with 7 toes instead of 10. But the cold never left me. Even now, 50 years later, I can't get warm. Not really. When winter comes, when the temperature drops, I feel it in my bones. Feel that Chosin cold creeping back. Feel my missing fingers aching. Feel the frozen rifle stuck to my palms. Feel the wind cutting through me like I'm still on that hill, still fighting, still freezing to death. I can't go outside in winter without layers of clothing. Gloves, heavy coats, thermal underwear. People think I'm crazy. It's 40 degrees. Why am I dressed for an Arctic expedition? But 40 degrees is warm compared to Chosin. 40 degrees won't kill you in minutes. 40 degrees is tropical. But I still feel cold. I still feel that frozen rifle in my hands. Still feel the skin tearing away. Still feel my fingers dying, piece by piece, while I kept fighting because stopping meant dying faster. I came home in March 1951. Purple Heart. Frostbite casualties were considered wounded in action. They gave me a medal for losing my fingers to the cold, like it was an honor, like I'd done something brave instead of just surviving. My family didn't understand, couldn't understand. I'd come home missing pieces of myself, scarred, damaged. They asked what happened. I told them it was cold. They nodded like they understood, but they didn't. How could they? They'd never experienced 40 below, never had their flesh freeze to metal, never watched friends die from exposure while enemies tried to kill them. I tried to go back to normal life, got a job, got married, had kids, built a life. But I was never really there. Part of me is still at Chosin, still in that foxhole with Martinez, still holding that frozen rifle, still fighting in the coldest hell on earth. My wife left me in 1962, said I was distant, said I couldn't connect, said it was like living with a ghost. She was right. I was a ghost. The real Frank Ramos died at Chosin. What came back was just the parts the cold didn't take. The nightmares are about the cold, not the fighting, the cold. I dream about freezing, about my hands turning white, then black, about the rifle stuck to my skin, about Martinez dying beside me while I couldn't help him, about men frozen solid in their foxholes, dead but still in firing positions, killed by the cold before the Chinese could reach them. I wake up shivering, even in summer, even with the heat on, even under blankets. I wake up cold, certain I'm back there, certain I'm dying, certain the Chosin cold has come back to finish what it started. The Marine Corps calls Chosin a fighting withdrawal, a successful operation. We broke through the Chinese encirclement, saved the division, evacuated successfully. A victory. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Barely. We lost over 700 men killed and thousands wounded. Thousands more with frostbite casualties, amputations, permanent damage, disabilities from the cold. We didn't defeat the Chinese. We just didn't die. And for some of us, that was worse than dying. Martinez never got to go home to his mother, never got to tell her he loved her. He's buried in a military cemetery somewhere, or maybe his body was lost in the withdrawal. I don't know. I never found out, never had the courage to look. I lost count of the men who died in my company, killed by Chinese bullets, Chinese grenades, Chinese bayonets, but more killed by the cold, by hypothermia, by frostbite, by exposure, killed by 40 below temperatures that turned human beings into frozen statues. The Chosin Reservoir, they call it the frozen Chosin now, a badge of honor, a proud moment in Marine Corps history. Marines holding against impossible odds in impossible conditions. Semper Fi, never surrender, death before dishonor. But there was no honor at Chosin, just cold, just suffering, just men dying slowly from the inside out as the cold took them piece by piece. I'm 73 years old. I've been missing my fingers and toes for over 50 years, but I still feel them. Phantom pain, the doctors call it. Your brain remembers what was there, sends signals to tissue that doesn't exist anymore. You feel pain in fingers that were cut away decades ago. But it's not just phantom pain. It's real. The cold is real. The memories are real. The frozen rifle is real. I can still feel it in my hands, still feel the metal stuck to my skin, still feel that moment when I realized I'd have to tear the flesh away or keep holding on. I chose to keep holding on, chose the rifle over my fingers, chose fighting over saving myself, because that's what you do. That's what Marines do. You hold the line. You don't give up. You fight until you can't fight anymore, and then you keep fighting anyway. They gave me a medal, called me a hero, said I'd served with honor and distinction. But I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who was too stubborn to die at Chosin, too stubborn to give up, too stubborn to let the cold win. But the cold did win, not all at once, not by killing me, but by taking me apart piece by piece. My fingers, my toes, my ability to feel warm, my connection to the living world, my capacity to be fully human. The cold won, and I've spent 50 years living with that defeat, 40 below zero. That's how cold it was at the Chosin Reservoir in November 1950. Cold enough to kill, cold enough to take pieces of you, cold enough to reach inside and freeze your soul. And once it freezes you, you never warm up again. Never. I'm still holding that frozen rifle, still feeling it stuck to my hands, still tearing my skin away, still fighting in the coldest hell on earth. And I'll be there until the day I die. Still cold. Always cold, forever cold.